and manufacturing.
Question number 3, Honourable David Parker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Finance. Has the government's asset sale program increased the confidence of mum and dad investors in capital markets and improved the standard of living for New Zealanders?
Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, yes, I do believe it's increased the confidence of mum and dad investors in capital markets, because tens of thousands of New Zealanders took part in those share sales, and more of them will have the opportunity early next year, subject to market conditions. When the government confirmed the share sales program as a part of its larger program to lift New Zealand's living standards, we said it would help reduce government debt, increase opportunities for investment for savers, and improve the company's financial performance. All of those things have been achieved, and so far the government has $4 billion in the bank to spend on other public assets, and we're waiting to hear from the opposition about whether they're so opposed to asset sales that they'll buy the assets back, and so far they haven't committed to that.
Supplementary question, Honourable David Parker.
Does he agree that the partial sale of state assets to 2% of the population has increased the gap between the rich and the poor in this country? And if not, why?
Well, no, Mr Speaker, particularly since the main complaint about it is that those who felt they were wealthy enough to buy the shares are now less wealthy several months later, which shows that the taxpayer got good value for those assets, and investors need to take a long-term view.
Supplementary question, Honourable David Parker.
How can he stand up and seriously claim that foregoing half the revenue and the ownership of SOEs to 2% of the population is to the benefit of the country as a whole, when the sales make the Crown's income account worse every single year to the end of the forecast period?
What a genius! Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, because what I've said is correct. And secondly, if the opposition believe that the government would be better off from owning the assets, then they would commit to buying them back, particularly if a majority of those who vote in the referendum are against the sales. I would have thought it's up to the opposition to take that referendum seriously and commit to buying the assets back.
Order. Order.
It's the only line you've got, Billy.
Order. Supplementary question, Honourable David Parker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Would he still be begging the opposition to buy the energy companies back in a desperate attempt to pump up the slumping share prices if the asset share program had been a success rather than the failure it's patently been?
Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, no, we'll be advising not begging the opposition, but advising them to abandon their policy around the electricity assets, where they are the only political party in the world we can find who is promising to undo a competitive electricity market and go back to central control. Well, the last time it happened was 1917 in the Russian Revolution, but it hasn't happened since. So, Mr Speaker, we're very pleased to have completed 3/4 of the asset sales program. The people of Christchurch will get a new hospital financed by the proceeds of those sales, and they'll be wondering what the Labor and Greens are going to do about buying back the assets.
Supplementary question, Honourable David Parker.
Given that only 2% of New Zealanders invested in shares and that the price of the shares for each energy company are now below the float price, how does that build confidence in capital markets?
Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, that's up to investors, but the member can't claim that those sales have widened the gap between rich and poor, because as he's pointed out himself, they bought the shares, they're now worth less, so the gap between the rich and the poor must have closed.
Order. Order. Question number 4, Dr. Jan Yang.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Economic Development. What reports has he received